So I tweaked the title a bit to Rethinking Neutrality, Why Gender Precision Improves PCV Outcome, because I think neutrality, I believe, and actually I stand with the scholars, like among many scholars who believe that gender neutrality and PCV is preventing and countering violent extremism. So I will use this terminology a lot, okay? So again, PCV, preventing, countering violent extremism, and we believe that gender neutrality is not effective. If we would like to provide them with intervention, we would like to understand the reason why they embark in violent extremism and etc., which I will talk further later. All right, so when we talk about preventing and countering violent extremism, what is violent extremism? So I usually, when I speak in public, I rather touch base on the foundational understanding of violent extremism rather than just, jump straight into the case studies and then all of us might be lost at the end, because I always assume that, my audience sometimes among them are not familiar with this, area of discipline, right? So violent extremism is basically radical ideologies. The term is interchangeable, yeah? So there are two main archetypes of radical ideologies, the religious-based and the non-religious-based one. And what I meant by religious-based violent extremism does not mean that the religion teaches radical ideologies. But what usually happens is miscontextualization, manipulation, and misinterpretation of religious texts, especially the vulnerable ones, such as the verses about war in the past. These are the things that the terrorist groups often use to justify the violence. So coming back to the two archetypes of violent extremisms, the religious base we have from the past, groups like Al-Qaeda, Jamaah Islamiyah. In the region, we have JAD and JAT and MIT from Indonesia. We also have Jamaah Islamiyah is still around, even though they announced that they disbanded themselves. It is still, it is still very debatable, right? So they exist in Indonesia, Malaysia, and Singapore. We also have MNLF, MILF, Abu Sayyaf group from the Philippines, for instance. So, and of course, we have ISIS, right? The Islamic State of Iraq and Syria, which has self-proclaimed themselves in 2014. All right, these belong to the religious-based radical ideology, religious-based violent extremist groups. All right, the non-religious-based ones is far-right extremism, which has actually emerged from about 3 to 4 years ago, and then the group like the incel, involuntary celibate, for instance, falls under the category of far-right extremism together with QAnon. Usually far-right extremism, okay, unlike ISIS, right? ISIS, Al-Qaeda, Jamaah Islamiyah, and all those violent jihadist group, obviously they miscontextualize a lot the term of jihad, right? Taken from the Holy Book of Quran, for instance. But the far-right extremism, on the other hand, is characterized by anti-multiculturalism, racial supremacy, Islamophobia, xenophobia, xenophobia, and of course, misogynistic attitude. It means hatred towards women, right? And then we also have, for example, in the region of Southeast Asia, we also have the very middle picture is Wiratu, the monk of he's a monk, a very famous monk in Myanmar. He is categorized under the far-right extremists by the scholars in this field because he instigated persecution against the Muslims in Myanmar, especially among the Rohingya community. And of course, the very last one is Hindutva. Please do not be tricked by the name. Has nothing to do about Hinduism or what Hinduism teaches. This group is far-right extremists. They also preaches or supports persecutions against the non-Hindu, and thinking that Hindu is actually very supreme or superior than the rest of the religion. So these are among the strains that we have currently in terms of radical ideologies. Now, how individuals subscribe to radical ideologies, right? This is always the question. Now, there are many models, okay, of radicalization pathways, we call it. But one of the most prominent models in the field is this thing called the staircase of radicalism by Mogandam. Okay, he published this in 2005. And then so we, like most of us, right, the non-radicalized individuals, we fall at the ground floor. Okay, a non-radicalized individual. So what happened is that in radicalization is a process. It doesn't happen overnight, and it has stages, and each stages comes with higher intensity and more dangerous threats. All right. So what does this staircase of radicalization mean? Essentially is that usually it will start with individuals having grievances. It can be any form of grievances, okay? Having a problem, stress life, grievances, okay? And then the second one will be finding someone to be responsible for the grievances that they have. It could be people from different community. It could be people from different racial group. It could be the government as well, okay? It could be people from different ethnicity, etc. like that. And then the third floor is actually critical because this is when the moral engagement happens. And what I mean by the moral engagement is the internalization of radical ideologies justifying these pathways, okay, all the way towards the end. So the fourth law and the fifth law is actually very fine. It is actually a fine line. Okay, the difference between the fourth law and the fifth law is that on the fourth law, people solidify the violent acts into violent action, but it's not an action yet. And on the fifth law, it is when the notion turns into the action. It means it is where the terrorism or terrorist attack happened. It is in the fifth law, right? So this is again Mogandam's staircase of radicalization. Another model that is often used in this field is this model by Karpova, right? It's a radicalization pyramid. The same thing, it is, it will start from having social stress and then will move to motivational stage. And then in the mobilization stage, it is where the individuals have the opportunity, the capacity, the resources to actually, carry out an attack. And then the terminal stage is when there is a solidification of violent thoughts into violent acts, and then the incident, the terrorist act. Okay, but essentially it is the same thing. I'm just showing two models that we often use. But guess what? These two models, among all other models, are gender neutral, which means we do not really actually take into gender elements within the models, that gender doesn't matter, right? So this was the start whereby the scholars in the field thought that, look, yes, understanding these models, understanding how people embark in violent extremism is useful, but then whether it is effective to really understand gender-specific group of people, okay, to understand the reason why they embark in violent extremism, why they stay in that radical ideologies, and how they could actually exit from that radical ideologies. This has to be gender specific because research and evidences have shown that the reasons between the two categories of gender is actually different. And this is why gender actually matters in preventing and countering violent extremism, because gender neutrality in PCB actually produce one-size-fits-none policies, right? For instance, right, when we research about this, we found out that for men, the reason why they embark in violent extremism is because they like to feel masculine. Okay, so they like to take up the arms and then go to the battlefield because they feel so masculine doing that, except that the masculinity is not healthy here, right? Also, men that has lost their status, they are very vulnerable. If they come across radical individuals that propagate the radical ideologies, usually they will join. And then some of them just are thrill seekers. Some of them feels that doing that makes them hero. And some of them really love the brotherhood in the terrorist groups, the fraternity, the solidarity, and etc. So these are things that we found among the men, right? Among the male terrorists. What about the female terrorists, right? For a context, I have been in touch, I have been interviewing female terrorists in the region, those who are still incarcerated and those who have been freed and acquitted by the government, now becoming the part of community members, but they are ex-terrorists. Okay, so this is actually all these findings underpin my research. Actually, my current dissertation is studying the possibility on how we could possibly enhance the current de-radicalization program, especially for female terrorist inmates, because until now it is still very much understudied. Okay, so coming back to the slides, that was for men. And for women, actually there are reasons. When I interviewed them, then I came across all these things that they said. Actually, when I asked, why did you actually embrace in violent jihadism? What made you feel attracted, right? What is so attractive about this ideology? Then they said something about, because they experience intimate partner coercion, gender-based violence at home. Some of them were very stressed about motherhood and caregiving pressure, so they just want to do something totally different. And some of them actually experience a very bad level of patriarchy at home, whereby they are not given any voice. And therefore, embarking in violent extremism, engaging in radical ideologies, following ISIS and become ISIS brides or ISIS soldiers made them feel powerful, because in this way they can actually exercise their agency and gain back their sense of significance and sense of belonging, and feel important. Things that they are deprived from their daily lives. Right? So again, gender is therefore matters in PCBE, because the stigma won't help here, right? The stigma that, men always hold the frontline roles, they are always the one that take up the arms and kill the people, and then women are always having the secondary roles. That's not true, because we have been, in Europe, this has been, research, and they actually have the same findings, but specifically in Southeast Asia, we have seen the increasing number of female terrorists in the region. Okay, especially after 2014, and the number goes up after the pandemic, so 2022 onwards. Okay, and so the women are nowadays not only are the one taking up the arms and combating in the field. In the case of in Syria, they are also becoming, they are not hesitate to become suicide bombers. All right, and being suicide bombers in the past used to be the role of men. So therefore, actually having the stigma that man is actually doing this and women actually doing that actually doesn't help, because it will have quite an implication for our public safety and security. Okay, there are so many theories in the field, right, underpinning these studies, becoming the foundation of this gender-based or gender-sensitive approach in preventing and countering violent extremism. There are theories like the trauma-informed theories, and then relational theories, and then rational choice theories. But one of the theories that I actually often use, both in my publications and also when I speak in public, is this gender pathway theories by Kathleen Daly. When she published it in her work in the 1992. It was not so popular back then, but I guess, as we experience more and more female extremism, we feel that yes, there is an importance actually in taking into account her work. So basically, in gender pathway theories, this theory believed that the reason of women entry to violent extremism, the reason women stay, and the reason why women could exit from violent extremism different. They are different from the male counterparts. Okay, they are non-equivalent. And another interesting finding is that who delivers the message, like the messengers, matters. Which means, when an individual enter or subscribe to violent extremism, usually it's because somebody propagate the ideology, whether it is offline, whether it is from online spaces and all that. If we found in our study that it will be more effective if the propagator is women, radicalizing women, then the women will join. If a man trying to radicalize women, usually it won't work. and it is the other way around. By the same token, when we talk about how could we actually impose an effective intervention, right? How to de-radicalize, we call it. De-radicalize means we reverse, we rectify the individual's ideology back to the mainstream, right? How to impose an effective de-radicalization program is that we need to use usually the similar gender to do this. So there are a lot of women terrorist inmates that I interview. They always tell me that, they call me Prof, okay? So when I interview them, Prof, sometimes when an officer come down, and the officer can be a psychologist, the officer can be a counselor, and they will have counseling session, and happen that the staff is a man, a male counselor, a male psychologist, the women will usually shut down. They just shut down. They just don't feel like talking about it because in their mind, men cannot really understand women's problem. Now, for me, I think we have to move forward from whether we agree or disagree about this, okay? For me, what is important to really get the lived experience of these individuals? Well, if most of them feel that way, maybe there is a truth in it. If most of them feel that way, what is important now is how we help them exit violent extremism, right? So we take into account that factor and okay, maybe we have to actually increase the number of female staff in prison. Because a lot of prisons in Southeast Asia, especially the prisons that are doing the specific program of de-radicalization, are very much male-centric and male-dominated environment. So again, for men, right, masculinity matters. The issue of masculinity, they want to be protector. Some of them actually want to be avenger. And then brotherhood, the bonding, and the risk-taking identities. On the other hand, for the female groups, they talk about femininity. Hence, they romanticize, okay, the notion of jihadist bride. That was actually propagated by ISIS, that was actually promoted by ISIS. Look, do you want to marry like one of our members? Because then you will become jihadist bride. Because in becoming jihadist bride, you will be A, B, C, D. And they love the idea. Okay, so all of these things actually are things that matters for the women, for the female group, right? Things like sisterhood, the caregiving burden. Women that I interview also said something very, very interesting, whereby they said that, look, the reason why they embark in violent extremism, they believe in this particular radical ideologies, is because they detest motherhood. However, the other groups of women, the same thing, female extremists, say that the reason why they exit from the radical ideologies is because they are mothers. And they feel they have to stop. They have another priority. They want to see their children grow up. Okay, so motherhood is actually a double-edged sword when it comes to violent extremism. Things for women also includes gender-based violence that they experience, the trauma from there, very much impacting this group, and intimate partner control as well. Okay, so what we miss when we ignore gender in PCVE, the first thing is the operational role, right? There is an assumption, okay, general assumptions that women actually is only a supporting role. No, that is wrong. Okay, women, they propagate, they are involved in terrorism financing, they are also involved in logistics, in policing unit, in suicide attacks, because a lot of them tend to be suicide bombers, which are unfortunately the suicide bombers. By now they are dead. They passed away. I couldn't even interview them, right, because they were committed suicide, right? They bombed themselves. And then for the men, they are actually beyond the fighters. Some of them actually took a role as a caregivers, logistics as well. They are also very much involved in online spaces. And also, if we ignore gender in PCVE, we will tend to have a security blind spot. When we think that, when we stereotype that, oh, women is low risk, man is high risk. All right, so we tend to only focus our security and our surveillance in the male groups, which is actually unfortunate, because usually when the security do that, something happened, and that something happened is perpetrated by the female. Okay, so one way or another, it has negative implications for sure. So these are the cases, among many cases actually, that we have from Southeast Asia. The first one here is the Holo bombing in the Philippines, when 2 women actually bombed the church in Holo, right? The middle one is where these women, the mother and the 2 daughters, and that's her husband and the other, so that man is the brother of the 2 daughters. They were involved in the attack in Malaysia in 2024, quite recent, in Ulu Tiram, Johor, Malaysia. And the other one is 2 women plotting the attack in the presidential palace in Jakarta. They were so ready to commit the suicide attacks. And then for Singapore itself, right, we have seen this increasing number of Singaporean women getting themselves radicalized. But for Singapore, it is more interesting because radicalization happened online, all in online spaces. Okay, and in Singapore, it is not so much about embarking in jihadism or far-right extremism or the salad bar ideologies. Now we also have it, it's another strain. But for Singapore women, it is because they are influenced by the geopolitical dynamics of Israel Hamas conflict. Okay, and the reason why Singapore government actually categorized them under radicalized individuals is because they really believe in violence. They vouch violence, and they are so ready to attack the Jews in Singapore and overseas. They are so ready. So it actually moves a little bit. It's crossing the line between activism to extremism. Okay, because in activism they shouldn't believe in violence. So when they believe in violence, and for this case, there is an inclination of them to be anti-Semitic. Okay, they hate Jews, the innocent Jews for no reason, just because of the Israel-Palestine conflict, and they also wanted to attack synagogues in Singapore. In Singapore, we have a few synagogues, so hence the government actually issued a restriction order for these individuals. So from gender sensitive to gender effective, look, there are a lot of literatures already talking about gender responsive. Right? How to be gender responsive and gender responsive. The problem of gender responsive in this region is that, look, that is the ideal one. The thing is, in the region, when it comes to preventing and countering violent extremism, we don't even know about gender sensitivity. How then we could be gender responsive if we are not gender sensitive? This is something, the idea is quite foreign to us. It's still, the experts are divided into different views. There are a lot of de-radicalization and, counter-radicalization program in the regions are still very much gender neutral. So it is a long road to gender responsive. But what I think is very, very important is to be gender sensitive first, to understand about gender sensitivity in order to eventually we can actually invent something, produce something, program something that is gender responsive. So from gender sensitive to gender responsive, what are the examples of this program? Let's say in terms of the assessment and the casework, right? We have to disaggregate indicators for both men and women. Maybe starts from that. And we also have to move towards man responsive and women responsive. And how to do this? We have to conduct a lot of research. It has to be evidence-based, to really understand, for the male individuals, this actually what caused them. And for the women, it's actually what caused them to embark in violent extremism. And what actually can disengage them from these radical ideologies. Everything must be research-based, not a stereotype, not a stigma, not an assumption. That's important. For the women responsive, this is actually one of the examples of women responsive programs that have been practiced in another region, in another countries that have been practicing this. So when we talk about women responsive, we talk about the safety planning, the trauma-informed care, the child care visitation. So a lot of women in prison, they would like to be visited by their children. A lot of them are mothers, and I'm talking about female terrorists here, okay? And children visitation, can actually help them to disengage from these radical ideologies and then enhance the effectiveness of de-radicalization program. And then talk about how to make them independent financially, right? And then identity rebuilding, for instance. And then for the men responsive program, we can talk about violence resistance, how to prevent this man from using violence, to stay away from violence, how to promote positive masculinity to this group of people, how to actually provide fatherhood support, because it's not only mother who needs support, the father groups as well. What about their job pathways, finding them jobs so they feel empowered, so they feel important, and etc. And also to find the peer group replacement for them, right? And then the institutional design, we can talk about staffing, because again, as I mentioned before, most of the de-radicalization program in the region, they are very male dominated. Maybe I believe we have to increase the number of more female staff, okay, to cater for the female groups of terrorists, offenders. And then we also have to train them to read gendered cues, not gender stereotype. In terms of facilities, again, child-sensitive spaces, safe disclosure rooms, privacy for gender-based violence-related interviewing, and then father-friendly visitations that supports pro-social identity as well. Oh, okay, so basically in terms of evaluation, again, I said we have to evaluate it with the research, right? Research based, and then these are the practices. Actually, as I mentioned before, this has been practiced by many countries. We just have to expand it a little more, and also the similar approach should be expanded to the male individuals as well. So when I talk about gender specific, it's not only for the female group, also for the male groups as well. As long as it's not gender neutral. This is just a summary. Basically, I believe that gender neutral underperforms, and that's why there is an importance for us to be gender sensitive and moving forward to gender responsive de-radicalization or to prevent and counter violent extremism. Thank you so much, and I'll be happy to connect with you. This is my LinkedIn page, so please connect with me. I also put my email and my phone number, and thank you very much.